I'm now joined on the broadcast by defense expert Major General Shashi Asthana. Major General Asthana, thank you so much for joining me on Mirror Now. Now we're talking about a ceasefire in four key Ukrainian cities. Do we see this happening and in fact being implemented on ground? Because like my colleague Pradeep Datta, who has been reporting live from Ukraine, has mentioned that we have to first see the implementation on ground and then think about actually evacuating our own citizens who are still stuck, especially in Sumy, because we are talking about 700 students who still remain in Sumy.
Because from Sumy, they have given two routes. One route goes directly to Russia, and the other route is via Ukraine, from the going to Ukrainian border. Now, earlier the safe passages could not be implemented because the firing could not stop, and both sides were blaming each other for being caused to the disturbance, with the result that the firing could not be stopped. But now, apparently, there is a fair amount of international pressure. There is a fair amount of activism shown by our MEA, and a lot of efforts has gone in to perhaps speak to both the countries, that is Ukraine as well as Russia, and they have agreed. And similarly, others are also speaking, like the French president has also spoken. So a window is being given for not only to the but to the other innocent civilians to move out if they wish to.
Right. Also, Major General Asthana, the fact that you rightly mentioned, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has already spoken to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. A conversation with Putin is most likely to happen in some time from now. Also, that conversation that happened as far as French President Emmanuel Macron is concerned. So all these are leading up to this particular ceasefire. However, when it comes to activism that you mentioned, quote unquote, as far as the Western countries are concerned, there is also a Russian offensive in the face of that, because here we are also looking at so many sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. Russia continues to brazen it out as well, because that stand that it's choosing to take is that it's Ukraine that needs to actually not go ahead and retaliate anymore, so that Russia actually stops with that entire invasion of Ukraine.
Certainly, because sanctions have not deterred Putin in past, and they will not be able to deter Putin even subsequently. For the simple reason, because he has nothing to lose, the sanctions have pushed President Putin to a corner wherein, if he has to have a favor in his country, the only thing is a military victory, and bringing, or even if not military victory, bringing the consolidation of Kyiv in a manner that the President Zelensky gives up the demand for joining NATO. Now, anything less than that, I don't think will deter Putin, because he has nothing very much to lose. Whatever sanctions had to be put have already been put, and anything more in terms of, let's say, even if they talk of energy or stopping the energy supply and things like that, that is going to affect their allies as well. So perhaps they'll be a little more careful in doing in blocking Nord Stream 1, because as of now, Nord Stream 1 is functioning. 2 may have been sanctioned and stopped, but 1 is still functioning. So if they stop 1, then Europe also freezes. So there is a cost to pay both sides. And I feel, for one, would certainly feel that I don't think sanctions will deter him. The demand of or any statement to say that, okay, Ukraine will not join NATO, either from NATO or from Zelensky, that may perhaps stop the aggression to the extent which we are
Major
looking at.
General Asthana, the fact that you mentioned that Russia doesn't have much to worry when it comes to these sanctions, we're also looking at US really deliberating so that the import of crude oil really is stopped from, Russia. So that is going to hit Russia hard, because we have seen the kind of sanctions that we are seeing on ground, whether it is hitting the Russian economy or otherwise. We've seen sporting sanctions and all of it that is currently taking place. However, if this particular thing happens, obviously it's going to impact both sides, but isn't it going to hit the people of the country, Russia specifically, really hard?
Yes, certainly it will affect the people of Russia, and it will affect a big way, because these are crippling sanctions and they are very effective sanctions. There is no doubt about it. But the problem is when the conflict goes up to a stage, the option to come back from here is not there with him, because there is no guarantee that even if he, let's say, stops firing, or if he comes back, those sanctions will be removed. Nobody is taking that guarantee. So the question is whether you have sanctions, whether you are suffering. Certainly people are suffering. There will be some resentment in Russia also, because people will physically suffer because of the financial restrictions which will get imposed, and the cost in terms of escalation, the cost of ruble going down, and things like that. So there is no doubt. But then the question is, if he stops firing, does it mean that the impact of the sanction will reduce? The answer is no. And if the answer is no, then why should he stop firing? The question, the stage of battle is such that he cannot disjoin the battle at this stage, and therefore, irrespective of the impact of the sanctions, he will have to go through to bring this to some conclusive end. And that some conclusive end is that somebody has to give an assurance that Ukraine will not join NATO. Because in any case, NATO was not admitting Ukraine because they applied in 2008. NATO also does not want to join direct land border with Russia. So basically, they don't want to give it. The only thing which they are fighting is that Ukraine is a sovereign country, and that's why it has absolute right to demand being a part of NATO, and that right should not be taken away. But nobody in NATO has ever promised Zelensky that you will be included in NATO. In fact, he has been talking about it a number of times in various forums, that please give me a timeline when you are going to include me. So in that context, what I say is...
And one final question, Major General Asthana, I'd like to understand also what are your hopes from this particular peace talk, a third one that is all set to happen between Russia and Ukraine. Anything on ground that you'd see happening after these peace talks, especially after the first two remained inconclusive?
See, if both the presidents, the way they have spoken, they are not coming down on their demands. Now, the demands of both are such that obviously, unless they change their demands, or they, I would say, soften their demands, there will be no outcome as far as the talks are concerned. Because talks are directly related to the demands being made by them. And if both of them continue to say on television that we are prepared to fight, and both of them reiterate their demand and have given no concession on demand, I don't think very much will happen. The meeting will perhaps be able to, at best, bring out certain humanitarian ceasefires and modalities to work out those ceasefires to get the willing civilians out of the combat zone.
Right. Major General Shashi Asthana, thank you so much for joining me on the broadcast.